Krishna So we'll begin with the Pranama mantra and then the first 10 shlokas of chapter 1. Oh yes, if you give those out too. Bhagavad Gita Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bhangum Langhayate Girim Yakripātamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Om Atha Prathamodhyayaha Dhritarashtravacha Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta-yuyutsavaha Mamata Pandavaschaiva Kimakurvata Sanjaya. Sanjaya Vacha Drishtva tu Pandavanekam Yudham Duryodhanastala Acharyam Pasangamya Raja Vachanam Abravit Pashyaitam Panduputranam Acharya Mahatim Shamum Vyudham Drupada Putrena Tava Shinyena Dhimata Atra Shura Maheshwasa Bhimarjuna Samayudhi Yuyudhano Viratascha Drupadascha Maharataha Drishtaketu Jekitanaha Kashirajasya Viryavan Purujit Kunti Bhojasya Shailyasya Narapungavaha Yudhamanjusya Vikranta Uttamaujasya Viryavan Saubhadro Draupadeyasya Sarva eva maharathaha Asmakam tu vishishtaye Tandi bodhadvijottama Nayaka mama sanyasya Sanyartham tan pravimite Bhavan Bhishmasya Karnasya Kripasya Samitin Jayaha Ashwatthama vikarnasya saumadatti tathaiva cha anye cha bhavah shura vararthe yakta jivitaha nana shastra praharana sarve yuddha visharada aparyaptam tarasmakam balam Bhishma virakshitam paryaptam tvidamete balam Bhima virakshitam. So now we will begin with the Bhagavad Gita proper. We had 3 classes already, and those 3 classes were all introductory. First, my own introduction to the subject, and then the introductions of Shankaracharya the second week and Madhusudana the third week. And so we'll begin with chapter 1, verse 1. And again, I will, in general, follow Madhusudana's Saraswati's commentary. Those who want, we have received new books. So those who want can see Sanchali. We got what, about 10 new copies or 50, 12 new copies, yes. So they can see Sanchali, and if they want copies. But you can do fine without a copy. If you don't want to buy a copy, you can do fine without one. You may want to have some copy of the Gita handy just for reference. So chapter 1 is known as Arjuna Vishara Yoga. Arjuna Vishara Yoga, the sorrow of Arjuna. And so all of you, of course, know the story of the Gita, and the larger story, the general story of the Mahabharata, and where the Gita comes within the Mahabharata, and how the setup is. So we need not to go over that, the setup for the Gita itself, except for there are a few things that from time to time will be pertinent that I'll just remind us of. For instance, the idea of the Gita being set on the battlefield. That for some people is disturbing. Not so much in India because you're used to it, it's your holy scripture. So that's like saying that, well, I find Christ being crucified disturbing. Well, if you're Christian, you don't find it disturbing because that's Christianity. You have a whole context for it, and that's what it's about, so you don't find that disturbing. And so a Hindu normally would not find the battle setting disturbing. But there are people in the West who I found say that, oh, I don't like all of this battlefield talk and all of that. Why see life as a battlefield? Well, that's what we'll come to in the first verse. Why see life as a battlefield? It's not the only way to see it, but it's one analogy which is very useful. And so, as I said in earlier classes, the setting of the Gita is extremely important. And I mentioned last time that some, like the great Mahatma Gandhiji, he was extremely fond of the Gita. He called it his mother, as that verse which we say in the beginning, Amba. Bhagavad Gita is addressed as Amba, as mother. So he said that whenever in his life he had need for advice, he opened the Gita, and there he found the solution to all of life's problems. But at the same time, Mahatma Gandhi being thoroughly devoted, as I said last time, to the idea of ahimsa. He said that I cannot accept the idea that my mother, the Bhagavad Gita, would teach himsa, would teach actual fighting on the battlefield. And so Krishna's telling Arjuna to fight on the battlefield was just symbolic, purely symbolic, and not to be taken as actually asking him to fight on the battlefield. Well, that none of the commentators that I know of have ever accepted that, and I don't accept it also. Krishna was teaching Arjuna to fight on the battlefield because that at the moment was his duty. And so that has to be taken as part of the actual teaching of the Gita. But it applies to all of us as well. Luckily for most of us, we never have to see a battlefield. There are people who do, innocent civilians, of course, who are caught up in battlefields. But most of us can live out our lives without seeing one. But if the Gita is true on the battlefield, then it's certainly true in the midst of our lives, which are much less dramatic, much less traumatic most of the time. And there are times in our lives also when we may face tragedy, similar to that which is faced on the battlefield, just not on the same scale. Gigantic scale where hundreds of thousands of people, lakhs of people are being killed. But in our own lives, sometimes we have to face tragedy as well. But the Gita is meant for all situations in life. It applies to a soldier, it applies to a police officer, it applies to the street sweeper, it applies to a rickshawala, it applies to a taxi driver, it applies to a professor, a doctor, engineer, whatever. So it opens with the famous words. It starts with Bhagavan Vyasa, the narrator, saying, opening with Dhritarashtra Vacha, Dhritarashtra said, Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kimakurvata Sanjaya. So he asks, Dhritarashtra asks Sanjaya, what happened on the battlefield? What happened on the battlefield? So before I go through word by word and the significance of the words, let me say that, again, this is part of the setup, but it's part of the setup which is important to remind us of, that Sanjaya is asking, Dhritarashtra is asking in the past tense, what happened? So that means that the war has already been fought, and Dhritarashtra, who was not there to see it, he's asking Sanjaya what happened. Because his own sons and his nephews were the main opposing forces in the battlefield. And so he wants to know what happened. Naturally, he's a father. His son, all of his sons, are arrayed in battle against his brother's sons. And so he knows the strength of the Pandavas. He knows that the Kauravas, his own sons, they have superior forces. Their forces far outnumbered the forces of Arjuna and his brothers, the other Pandavas. So he knows that. But he also knows that virtue is on the side of the Pandavas. Dhritarashtra wasn't a fool. He was a blind king, but he was not a fool. So he knew that virtue lay on the side of the others, on the other side. And yet, naturally, he was hoping that his own sons would defeat the Pandavas and would be able to rule. And so that conflict was in his mind. That conflict was raging in his heart, that he knew that the cause of his sons was adharma, and that the Pandavas had a right to the kingdom. And his sons had cheated them out of their kingdom. And that Krishna, the Lord himself, was on the side of the Pandavas. Krishna said that I won't fight, but I will be your charioteer and your counselor, of course. And so Dhritarashtra knew all of this. And so in fear for his sons, in anxiety, what happened on the battlefield? In those days, he couldn't Google what's the result of the battle and get constant updates by text messages and so forth. And there wasn't even a telegram that they could send by Morse code the results of the battle. So he's sitting there unaware of what has happened, knowing only that the battle was to be fought. And by now it must have been fought. And so he asks, Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre. On Kurukshetra, the field of the Kurus, which is the Dharma Kshetra, the field of Dharma. So now Kurukshetra, some of you surely have seen Kurukshetra. Some of you have some of you been to Kurukshetra? Yes, I also have been there. Vast field in North India. It's famous from the time of the Vedas. At the time of the Gita, which came at the end of the Vedic period, when the Vedas had already been composed. This comes after the Vedas were composed, but when the Vedas were still the living scriptures of the land. From the time of Buddhism, then classical Hinduism begins. Maybe it actually it probably started before the time of Buddha. But by the time of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, they were still living the Vedic life, but the basic Vedic composition had happened. And so it was the end of the Vedic period, before the classical Hinduism arose, Puranic Hinduism arose. And so the Kurukshetra was known even in the Vedas. It's mentioned in the Vedas several times as a field where great sacrifices were held, great yajnas. So it was known as a great place for yajna, for sacrifice, for the practice of dharma. And so that was the field on which these armies had come. And remember that these armies were from all over North India, which today includes, which at that time included Pakistan and Afghanistan. They were part of North India as well. The Indian culture spread up through Afghanistan. In fact, at this time, Indian culture, Vedic culture, reached all the way to Syria. The Mitanni kingdom was a Vedic kingdom that was in present-day Syria. And as I said once before in a lecture here, some of the pharaohs in ancient Egypt, thousands and thousands of years ago, some of the pharaohs preferred to marry Hindu princesses or Vedic princesses from the Mitanni kingdom. But contiguous within North India at that time was the Gangetic Plain, the Punjab, from east of Varanasi through what's now Pakistan and Afghanistan. That all was part of North India. As you know, Gandhari is named after her native place, which was Kandahar now. And so all of that, so that whole area was engaged in this war. So if the ancient texts are to be believed, yes, the ancient texts have been mythologized, no doubt. That is exaggerations which come naturally. But even taking that there are exaggerations due to the way that people tell stories. Even ourselves, we know that every time we tell the same story, it gets a little bit bigger. So in ancient times, it was no different. But the basic story, many believe, and I believe, the basic story is true, and that it was a vast array of forces coming from Afghanistan, from as far as Kashi in the east to Afghanistan in the west, or what we now call Afghanistan. And they were arrayed on the battle, and they battled on Kurukshetra. So it's called Dharma Kshetra. So it's called Dharma Kshetra. Why? For one reason, because from ancient times it was understood Vedic sacrifices. Many were said to have been performed there. But it's also called Dharma Kshetra. Started from this time because the battle of Dharma was being fought there. In the past, it had been a place of sacrifice, Vedic sacrifice, yajna, but now it was a place of sacrifice of humanity. And that was the sacrifice of humanity for the establishment of Dharma, for the protection of Dharma. Again, the Pandavas had tried everything with Krishna at their side, and with Krishna in the lead, actually. They tried everything to avoid war. They had tried to get the Kauravas to see the harm that would come if they were joined in battle. And they even were willing to reduce their wants to just a village for each of the 5 brothers. And then the vast kingdom could remain with the Kauravas. But even that Duryodhana wouldn't allow. He said he wouldn't give them even an inch of land. And so they tried everything to prevent war, and now the war was beginning. So it was Dharmakshatra also now, not just historically, but it was Dharmakshatra now because it was a field where Dharma was to be protected. And that also Dhritarashtra knew, because as I said, he knew that his sons were in the wrong and that the Pandavas were in the right. So again, Dhritarashtra says, Dharmakshatre Kurukshetre, in the field of the Kurus, known as, or the Dharmakshatra, which is known as Kurukshetra, Yuyutsavaha, those who are desiring to fight. Yuyutsavaha is Yuyutsu, means one who wants to fight, from Yud, to go to battle. Just like Mumukshu is one who's desirous of moksha. So Mumukshu and Yuyutsu is one desirous of fighting. And so Yuyutsavaha, the plural, those who were Samaveta, those who were gathered, the Yuyutsavaha who were Samaveta, those desirous to fight who had gathered on the Dharmakshatra, which was known as Kurukshetra. And who were they? Mamakaha, mine. Mamakaha, mine. My sons, they are there. And the allies of my sons. And Pandavaschaiva, and the sons of Pandu, the Pandavas, the five Pancha Pandavas, they also were there. So it's significant that he says Mamakaha Pandavaschaiva. He's making a distinction between my children and those children. The Pandavas are not Mamakaha, they're not mine. Mine are Duryodhana and his other brothers, the 99 Kauravas, and their allies. So from the beginning, you see that both he's afraid, Dhritarashtra, because he knows what is right and what is wrong. He knows what is true and what is false. But he can't follow it, and he can't wish for it also, because that would be wishing for the destruction of his sons. And also, he is possessed of selfishness. He is pointing to, these are my people, and those are somebody else's. That's one of the fundamental aspects of ignorance. And that's one of the things Swami Vivekananda harped on over and over again in his teachings. And Holy Mother also, where Holy Mother says, learn to make the whole world your own. No one is a stranger. Everyone is mamakaha. Everyone are mine. No one is a stranger. And so yes, love your own children. Love your own children. Take care of your own children. But don't forget about other children. Take care of your own family. But don't ignore other families as well. Just to take care of your own family and to care nothing for other families, that is ignorance. That's a spiritual ignorance. So yes, you have a primary responsibility for a householder, for a grihastha, for a householder. You have a primary responsibility to take care of your family, because that's the basic social unit, but not an exclusive responsibility to your family. That's the problem, where we become exclusive. Let my children get ahead and let other children go to hell. It doesn't matter. Let my family be well fed, and if others are hungry, that's their problem. That's their problem. That's an idea which is spreading in the modern world, and it's a deadly idea. It's spreading right here in America. It's a very deadly idea. It's the very opposite of Dharma. And so Dhritarashtra was possessed by that idea, not possessed of it because he had no control over it. He was possessed by it. It had control over him. So the Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kima Kurvata Sanjaya. Oh Sanjaya, what did they do? Again, Sanjaya, because he was given the Divya Drishti, the divine sight, he was able to see at a great distance and into the past. To see what had happened on the battlefield. And so Vyasa is the writer, but Sanjaya is the narrator. And so one of the very rare places where Vyasa says anything is right at the beginning, where the Dhritarashtra Vacha. And then what Dhritarashtra said. And then Sanjaya begins his narration. There are only a very few lines in the Gita where Vyasa is directly speaking himself as the narrator. Otherwise, it's Sanjaya telling Dhritarashtra what Arjuna and Krishna said, but in this first chapter, what Duryodhana said also. And so again, we get the setup here where Dhritarashtra is afraid because he knows the truth. So then the second verse begins, is introduced by Sanjaya Vacha Drishtva tu Pandavanekam Vyurham Duryodhanastada Acharyam Upasangamya Raja Vajanam Abravit. So Sanjaya said, in answer to Dhritarashtra's question, Drishtva tu Pandavanekam Vyurham Duryodhanastada. So Duryodhana, seeing the Pandavas and those who belong, the Pandavas and their allies, all of those who belong to the Pandavas, arrayed, viewed him. Then the Duryodhana, having seen that, Acharya Upasangamya, approaching the Acharya, the teacher. And who is the teacher? The teacher is Drona Acharya. Drona. Raja Vachanam Abravit. Raja, King Duryodhana, the king, Vachanam Abravit, said this word. So Duryodhana, seeing the Pandavas arrayed in front of him. Again, Duryodhana had the superior forces, much superior in number to the Pandava forces. And yet he also knew the truth. Duryodhana also, no matter how deluded he was not stupid. He knew that what they had done was wrong. And most people, when they do something wrong, know that what they're doing is wrong. No matter how much we may try to justify it, we know that it's wrong. And so Duryodhana was in that situation also. So seeing the Pandavas arrayed in front of him, then he had to be fearful. It's natural to be fearful in a battle situation anyway. Because any soldier going into battle, even a battle-hardened soldier, doesn't know if this may be the last one. This may be the last one. Just as in sports. Sports are ritualized battles that are performed for fun, where you're not going to get killed, hopefully. Sometimes that happens too, depending on the sport. But they're ritualized battles. And so when you go into a sporting confrontation or when you go into an actual battle, you don't know really what's going to happen. Your team may be favored if it's a sport, or your army may be favored if it's an actual battle. But that doesn't mean that you will win. If you look in history, in sports you can see all the time on the sports pages in the newspaper. But if you look in history at battles, you find that so many times, not a majority of times, but still many times, that a weaker force somehow was able to prevail and defeat a much superior force. That has happened many, many times through history. And so every soldier knows that this may be my last battle. And so the adrenaline begins to rush. So there's an excitement, but there's also a fear. And so Duryodhana is possessed by that. And so it says, Drishtva tu, having seen, but. Tu means but. So why is but there? It could be Drishtva cha or Drishtva hi. It could be just for the sake of the meter. Vyasa could have put various things in there, or Sanjaya could have put various things in there. But he says Drishtva tu. When you say but, when we're talking about something, you're going along this way and then somebody says but, then suddenly you know that something, it's deflecting off of the course that it's going on. And so Drishtva tu, but he saw, but having seen. So but is a word that alerts us that there's some conflict, there's some contradiction, there's something going on here. And so Madhusudana says that tu, that but, means that Duryodhana, in spite of the fact that he had superior forces, he saw the Pandavas arrayed in front of him, and he knew that, no, now I'm in trouble. Now I'm in trouble. So he is trying to rouse himself, rouse up his heroism. So Acharya Upasangamya, he approaches the Acharya, he approaches Drona, the teacher. Duryodhana is the king. He should have called Drona to himself, and he was an egotistical king. The Pandavas, being humble, they certainly would have gone to Drona and bowed down before him, touched his feet. But that wasn't Duryodhana. But Duryodhana approached the Acharya, Drona, because he was afraid. I've seen that myself, that sort of thing, in a very different situation, where there was someone who, within one of our ashramas, I was very senior to him, and he would go way out of his way to avoid making pranam to me, even though I was senior to him, because he didn't want to be seen making pranam to a foreigner. And so he'd go way out of his way to avoid making pranam to me, time and time again, so many times that it was obvious what was happening. But then when he was being posted abroad, he saw me and he was terrified going abroad. What is going to happen to me now? And so he came running over and made pranam to me. The only time in my life that he ever did that, and it was because he was afraid. And so he was grasping for something. Well, I need blessings wherever I can get them. I'll take them even from him. So that was the case with Duryodhana. He goes and approaches Drona because he's terrified of what is going to happen. And so he speaks. And so speaking, he says, Pashyaitam banduputranam acharya mahatim jamum vyudham druparaputrena tava shishyena dhimata. Pashya, see. Of course, Drona is there on the battlefield, he's seeing. But Duryodhana says to him, look, the Mahatim Chamu. Chamu is army, and Mahati, the vast army of the Panduputranam, the sons of Pandu. Look at this vast army of the sons of Pandu arrayed in front of us. So Acharya, he addresses them as Acharya, as master. Look, see this vast army of the sons of Pandu arrayed in front of us. Vyudham Drupadaputrena, arrayed by Drupadaputra. What's his name? His name's not coming. Drishtadyumna, yes. Drishtadyumna. His name was escaping me for a minute. So Drishtadyumna was the son of Drupada, and he also was a student of Drona. And so Duryodhana is giving a pinch to Drona, the teacher. So you see here in the next few lines that Drona at one hand is raising Drona up, and on the other hand he's pinching him. And that also is true to experience. One Swami Ritajanandaji, a great Swami who was in Gretz for many years, died as the head of the Gretz ashram in France. He told me, I don't allow people to put me on a pedestal, because the same people that raise me up on the pedestal will be the ones to pull me down from the pedestal. So I don't allow it, and that's true. So Drona is doing that. So he's saying here that your disciple, Drishtadyumna, the son of Drupada, Shishyena Dhimata, by the student of yours, who is Dhimata, who is Dhimat, who is extremely intelligent. So you're a very intelligent disciple. He has arrayed the forces in front of us. The reason why he's giving a little pinch to Drona is that Drona was ambivalent about the battle. His sympathies were with the Pandavas, but his duty lay with the Kauravas. And so he was caught in between. His heart was on the other side, his body was on this side, and Duryodhana knew that. And so he also knew that if his heart is over there, he's not really going to fight wholeheartedly for us. He will actually be happy if they defeat us. And so That's why he goes over to him. He could have gone to Bhishma or to someone else, but he goes to Drona. But seeing the army of the Pandavas and the fear that comes with that and the knowledge that our cause is unrighteous, then he goes to one of his commanders who is the weak link in the chain. Bhishma he trusted, but Drona he didn't trust. And so then the next three verses are usually taken together, and I'll read them together. Atra shura maheshwasa bhimarjuna samayudhi yuyudhano viratascha drupadascha maharatah drishtaketuschekitanaha kashirajascha viryavan purujit kundibhojascha shaivyascha narapungavaha yudhamanyuscha vikranta uttamaujascha viryavan saubhadro draupadeyascha sarva eva maharatha. So then he says, here in this army of the Pandavas, here, Atra, are the heroes wielding great bows, the Shura, the heroes, Maheshwasa, who are holding great bows, who in battle are compeers of Bhima and Arjuna. Bhima Arjuna Samayudhi, they're equals of Bhima and Arjuna. So Bhima and Arjuna are not the only ones we have to worry about. There are all of these other heroes who are the equals of Bhima and Arjuna in battle. Duryodhana and Virata, and the Maharata, the great warrior Drupada. Maharata, Ratha you know, and Maha you know. And so Maharata was a particular class of warriors who were able to fight off a certain number of other soldiers. And it's a rather large number, like over 1,000 soldiers of Maharata is able to fight off 1,000 other soldiers. And so it was a classification of very great warriors. And Drishtaketu, Chekitana, and the valiant king of Varanasi, of Kashi Raja. So the king of Kashi was there fighting on the side of the Pandavas, and these other warriors, Purujit, Kunti Bhoja, Shaibya, who was the Narapungava, Shaibya Narapungava, Shaibya, the choicest of men, and the chivalrous Yudhamanyu, Yudhamanyuscha Vikranta, the heroic Yudhamanyu, and the valiant Uttamojas, the son of Subhadra, Abhimanyu, who was the son of Subhadra by Arjuna. He was also there. The sons of Draupadi, the 5 sons of Draupadi, all of whom are verily Maharathas. They all are great warriors who can, they themselves can fight off a small army, by each one of them by themselves can fight off a small army. And so he tells Drona that these are all of the people who are there. He names them again in order to let Drona know these are the people that you have to fight, and these are the people that you love. But these are the people that are on the other side that are a danger to us. And so, of course, Drona already knew all of this. And, of course, we could say that, well, Vyasa just put this in there because he wanted us, the readers, to know it. But no, Duryodhana wanted Drona to think about this also. And so then we come to the 7th verse. Asmakam tu vishishtaye tan nibodha dvijottama nayaka mama sanyasya sangyartam tan bravimite. Asmakam tu vishishtaye tan nibodha dvijottama. So he calls him Dvijottama. Drona was not a Kshatriya, he was a Brahmin. And so he calls him Dvijottama. Of course, at an earlier time, in the earlier Vedic age, there were the 3 castes that were Dvijas. But by this time, the late Vedic age, then only the Brahmins were the Dvijas. And so Duryodhana was not just Drona was not just a Dvija, but he was Dvijottama, the greatest of the Dvijas, greatest of the Brahmins. But there's a reason why Duryodhana, again, Duryodhana's mind is the mind of a trickster, the mind who's extremely manipulative, always manipulating people. And so that you see all through this dialogue. And you see it in the greater part of the Mahabharata also, wherever he comes. So what other reason does he call him Dvijottama, or greatest of the Brahmins? Because he's reminding him that you are a Brahmin, you're not a Kshatriya. Fighting belongs to us. And you don't really, no matter how much you are master, you're even my teacher, but you don't really know what you're doing. So he's reminding him that he's out of place, that he's a Dvija, and he doesn't really belong here. And so on the one hand, again, he's building him up, and on the other hand, he's giving pinches. So calling him Dvijottama, this also I've seen, and I'm sure that you have noticed it also. There are people that I know who their greatest delight in life is to insult another person without that person knowing that they're being insulted. To insult them in such a way that the person thinks that they've been praised, and everybody else knows that they've just been pinched. And so Duryodhana was like that. So he calls him Dvijottama, greatest of the Brahmins. But what he actually means is you're a complete impractical person that's out of his field. You shouldn't be here on the battlefield to begin with. So Nayaka mama sanyasya sanyartam tan bravimi te bravimi, I will tell you, mama sanyasya nayaka, my army's leaders, sanyartam, just for reminding you, just for the sake of getting it out there. Let me just remind you of who the leaders of my army are. Mama Nayaka, not our Nayaka, because you, Drona, are part of the army. So now someone like Arjuna, Yudhishthira, they would have said our Nayakas. But Duryodhana says mama. Everything is aham and mama, and mamakaha. So let me tell you, not because he doesn't know, but because I want to remind you of the people that are on our side. So then he says, Bhavan Bhishmascha Karnascha Kripascha Samitinjayaha Ashwathama Vikarnascha Saumadattir Jayadrataha. So here he says, he names them. He says, Bhavan, you, O revered sir, Drona, you are one of them, and Bhishma, Bhishmascha, Bhishmacha, and Bhishma. So you are one and Bhishma is one. So that Madhusudana says that it's significant that he names Drona first. So again, he's pushing Drona up, because he knows he depends on Drona. And that's the problem for manipulative people. When they know that they depend on somebody that they don't really trust, they want to insult them, and they do insult them, but they also have to build them up because they can't do without them. And so Duryodhana is in this situation where he has to build him up in order to solicit his the most help that we can get out of him, but he also has to pinch him because he doesn't trust him and knows that he's not really in place. So he names him first, Bhavan, you, O revered sir, and Bhishma, Karna, and Kripa Samitinjaya, Kripa who was always successful in battle, Samiti in battle, or battle, Jaya, he was always successful in battle, Kripa, and Karna, of course, the famous Karna, who at this point still doesn't know that he was of high birth. He still thought that he was of low birth. Ashwathama and Vikarna. So then he mentions commanders. Of course, at the very top are people like Bhishma and Drona, but then there are the commanders under them, like Ashwathama and Vikarna. So that also Madhusudana says this is significant also. He mentions Ashwathama first, because he's the son of Drona. So he mentions Drona first, and then he mentions, when he comes to the commanders, he mentions Ashwathama first also. Somadattir Jayadrataha. Somadatti and Jayadratha. So these, he mentions these also, that I've named the great heroes on the Pandava side, but Mamakaha, mine also are great warriors like these. Anye, verse 9, Anye cha bahava shura madarte tyatta jivitaha nana shastra praharanaha sarve yuddha visharadaha. Anye cha bahava, many others, bahu, many, Anye cha bahava, many others. Shura, great heroes. Madarte tyatta jivitaha, giving up their life for me. Madarte, for me, they're ready to give up their life. I have doubt about you, Drona. I have doubt about you. But these are ready to give up their lives for me. Look at them. Look at them. They're here to give up their lives for me. Nana shastra praharanaha. They're wielding various types of weapons, all types of weapons and missiles. Weapons that are used in the hand and weapons that are launched also. Nana shastra praharanaha. Sarve yuddha visharadaha. Sarve, all of them are yuddha visharadaha. All of them are skilled in battle. So they're all skilled in battle. They're all possessed of all types of weaponry. And they're madarte chakta jivitaha. They're ready to give up their very life for the sake of me. So again, he's telling this to Drona in order to try to solicit his attention and his help in the battle. And then verse 10 says, Aparyaptam tarasmakam balam bhishmabhirakshitam paryaptam twidame tesham balam bhimabhirakshitam. Aparyaptam tarasmakam balam bhishmabhirakshitam. So asmakam, our bala, here bala, of course bala means strength, but here bala means our forces. So force also means strength, but just like in English we talk about the US forces. So here bala means strength, but bala here means the armed forces, those who are our army. Asmakam, Bhishma Bhirakshitam, which is protected by Bhishma. Such great, the grandsire of Bhishma, the great man. He is in charge of all of our forces. He is our the general in charge of all of the forces. And this bala of ours, this force of ours, is aparyaptam. It's not paryaptam. Paryaptam means encompassed, circumscribed, contained. Ours is aparyaptam. It's uncontained. It's unlimited. It's so vast that it can't be contained within limits. And then paryaptam tuidam etesham balam bhimabhirakshitam. But etesham, of these guys over here, their bala, their army is paryaptam. It's contained. It's limited. It can be circumscribed. It can be measured. Ours is as though it's measureless, but theirs is measured. Bhima Bhirakshitam, which is protected by Bhima. And so yes, Bhima is terrible in battle, but he also his mind he doesn't have the greatest buddhi. And so we have Bhishma, who has extraordinary intelligence and a cool head. And they have Bhima, who is extremely strong, but extremely rash also. He can get hot-headed, he can make bad judgment calls and so forth. And so their force is paryaptam, contained, and it's Bhima Bhirakshitam, protected by Bhima. So then it goes on, Duryodhana goes on in verse 11. Ayaneshu cha sarveshu yatha bhagam avastita bhishmameva bhirakshantu bhavanta sarva eva hi. So Madhusudana says that now Duryodhana, he's finished with Drona. Okay, he's addressed him as Duryodhana and Bhavan, and named his son first and everything, and so he's he's said whatever he had to say as far as praising, both praising and pinching Drona. And so now he's finished with him. And so now he turns to others. Ayaneshu tu sarveshu yatha bhagam avastitaha. So he's telling everybody to go to their proper places, everyone in their proper place. Yatha bhagam. According to how we have divided the forces, everyone should go to their places. So bhavanta. Here, bhavan, he was addressing Drona, revered sir. But bhavantaha, that's the plural. So now he's addressing all the respected nayakas. So, however, venerable sirs, all of you without exception, sarva evahi, without any exception, while occupying all the positions in the different directions as allotted to you, yatha bhagam, please fully protect Bhishma in particular. Bhishma meva abhirakshantu. Protect Bhishma no matter what, because Bhishma is our hope. And that's one of the things that you find has been a military principle, not always followed, but in general, well, no, I shouldn't say that. It's always followed, but not in the same way. The head of the army is always protected more than anyone, because he is the one that's the most trusted, the most experienced. He's the one who's in touch with everybody. He's the one that people have respect for, that they're going to follow his commands. Somebody else, like Duryodhana, everybody knows he's corrupt. Everybody knows that he's not a good person. And so people are not going, everyone is not going to immediately rally under his command. But under Bhishma, everyone has respect for him. And so he's telling them, no matter what, stay in your places, but whatever you do, protect Bhishma. That is most important. Now, in modern battles, in the modern world, the commanding officers usually are far away from the line of fighting. So there's no chance of them being hurt unless a plane comes over and drops a bomb on them or something. But otherwise, they're far from the field of fighting. But in this time, and up until modern times, the commanding officer was expected to be on the battlefield with the forces. That was how the forces were given courage. If your commanding officer was in a shelter 20 miles away where nothing could reach him, and sending messages to you to fight, then what kind of encouragement is that? Well, he is protecting himself. He knows it's too dangerous to be out here. So he is miles and miles away to protect himself, but he expects us to fight for him. So no, until modern times, the commanding officer would be on the battlefield with the soldiers in order to encourage them. But because of that, it was all the more important that the soldiers protect the commanding officer. Because if he's gone, then the chances of winning the battle are very, very slim. It's like cutting the head, cutting off your head. That which leads directs the rest of your body, that is gone. So Bhishma me vabi rakshantu. Bhavanta, O revered sirs, protect him at all costs. So however, venerable sirs, all of you without exception, while occupying all the positions in the different directions as allotted, please fully protect Bhishma in particular. And we'll save the next verse, starting the next verse for next time, because that's when the action starts. It is not the actual battle, but the real action on the battlefield begins with verse 12. And this first chapter, let me say that I'll say a few more words, and then if you have any questions, you can ask those. But let me just say a few more words, and then if there are any questions. Madhusudana, as I've said before, he comments on every verse in the Gita. Shankaracharya and many others, they begin in the second chapter with the 11th verse, where Sri Krishna begins to give spiritual teaching to Arjuna. And so the first is just considered, well, that's just setting the story, setting the stage, but the actual teaching which needs commentary, that comes in the second chapter. But Madhusudana, he comments on every verse because he sees that every verse has some value and something that can be explained. So one of the specialties of his commentary, and as I said last time when going over his introduction, he himself says, I have commented on practically every word in the Gita. So even tu, even cha, even he, etc., gets attention from him. But this first chapter, because it is setting the stage for the teachings of the Gita, there's not philosophy that needs to be explained, just occasional psychology. And so we'll go through this much faster than the rest of the Gita. We should surely through the first chapter we'll do at least 10 verses a night on the first chapter, and maybe sometimes more. Like tonight we did 11 verses. But starting with the second chapter, there we will take it much more slowly, because each verse has to be understood in depth. And not just what it says in linguistically or whatever, but more important, what it means to us practically. What it means to us practically. But even this first chapter has meaning for us practically. It has, it's very psychological. So the spiritual teaching has not come yet, but psychological, social, cultural teaching has come. And one of the things about the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, neither of them has the authority of the Vedas. The Vedas are the authoritative texts of the Hindus. The Mahabharata and Ramayana are secondary. But in importance to Indian civilization, nothing equals the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Those two have influenced Indian civilization more than anything else. Yes, the Vedas are there, and the Vedas are still foundational because the Mahabharata and the Ramayana are based on the Vedic teaching. Both of them came at the end of the Vedic age, while the Vedic age was still alive. The Vedic age ended with Buddha. Before Buddha's time, probably they were the beginnings of the Puranic age mixing into the Vedic age, but the Vedic age was ended with the coming of the Buddha. But the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, they have the most influence of any texts that exist on Hindu civilization. There was a great Chinese thinker of the modern world in the 20th century, Lin Yutang. He was a Protestant Christian. He was Chinese, but had, I don't know if he converted or if his parents had converted, but one way or the other, he was a Protestant Christian. But he wrote two wonderful books, big, thick books, about this size. One called The Wisdom of India and the other called The Wisdom of China. And so he says in his book on the wisdom of India, and they're all the traditional texts of China. He wasn't projecting his Protestant Christianity into it. He was giving Chinese thought as Chinese thought, and Indian thought as Indian thought. But he says in his introduction to the wisdom of India, he said that when I turned my attention to India, first he wrote the wisdom of China, but he said when I turned my attention to India, which he'd always been interested in and which he knew a lot about already, but he said, when I turned my attention to write this book, I thought that, well, surely the most important texts in India would be the Upanishads. The Vedas in general, but certainly the Upanishads would be the most important text. But the more I studied, the more I saw that it was the Ramayana and the Mahabharata that had given shape to Indian civilization. That yes, the Vedas were the foundation, but it was the Ramayana and the Mahabharata which gave practical shape. In the Ramayana, you have the images of what a dharmic individual is to be. The dharmic man, the dharmic woman, the dharmic son, the dharmic or adharmic father, the dharmic older brother, dharmic younger brother, the dharmic king. So the image of dharma, the dharmic devotee, Hanuman, serving Sri Ram. It established in Indian civilization the idea of what dharma is, how a dharmic person is to behave. And the Mahabharata, that carried out in detail the ideas of civilization. It developed the idea of civilization. In the Mahabharata, more than in the Ramayana, you find that the people, the heroes in the Mahabharata, are more compromised in many ways. They're more questionable, they do questionable things and so forth. But because of that, it gives us an image of everyday life and how to lead our lives in the midst of everyday struggles where things are often getting compromised. And so the two together, the one which upholds the ideal of Dharma, what we should strive for, what we should try to be, and the other, how we do that in the midst of everyday situations where there are always compromising situations that we find ourselves caught in. How do we follow Dharma in those situations? So anyway, the first chapter also has its importance. So let me finally ask if there are any questions. No. Okay, well then I'll give a closing chant, and then we will close. I haven't really decided on a good closing chant for this, so why don't we just choose Purnamada. That's a good closing chant for everything. So those who know it, which is almost all of you, can chant along also. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate